Welcome to this WiseOwl DAX for Power BI tutorial. In this part of the series, we're going to look at how to create a financial year calendar. We'll begin with a quick recap of the CalendarAuto and Calendar functions and why you might choose one over the other. Then we'll look at a nice convenient way to set the start month for your financial year, making it easy to adjust later on if you need to. We'll look at how to calculate the start and end dates for the financial year calendar, and then how to calculate standard date parts like year, quarter and month, before showing you how to adjust those to give you the financial year, quarter and month. We'll look at how you can make sure your months are sorted correctly according to the start date of your financial year, and then how you can connect the calendar to other tables in your data model before we use time intelligence functions to create measures using the calendar you've created. So let's get started. To get started, I've imported some data from a version of our standard Excel Movies workbook. As usual, I'll drop a link in the video description so that you can download the data file and follow along using the same data if you'd like to. I've done a bit of basic tidying up already in the data model. I've just hidden a few of the fields from the report view. The main thing I want to do in this video though is replace the automatic calendar table that gets created for us for the release date field with a custom calendar using a financial year. The approach we're going to take is fairly similar to what we did in video 7.1, creating a basic calendar table. We'll just need to make some adjustments according to which month our financial year starts in. To begin, just a quick reminder of how you can disable the automatic date time system. I'm going to head up to the File menu in this report, choose Options and Settings, and then Options. If you want to disable the auto calendars for every future file that you create, in the Global section of the data load page, you can find the auto date time property here, so you can uncheck that to disable the property for new files. If you simply want to disable it for the current file, head to the data load page in the current file section, and then uncheck the same option, and then click OK. And what we should find is that the calendar symbol indicating the date time data type for the release date field has now disappeared. So if we want to use any of the time intelligence functions, we'll need to create our own custom calendar and link it to that field. As we saw in the previous video, DAX has a couple of functions that can help us when creating a custom calendar table. Just so that we can see the results of these functions, let's head into the Data view, and then from the Table Tools tab in the ribbon, we can choose to create a new table by writing a DAX expression. I'll just zoom in the formula bar here so we can see a little more clearly what I'm writing. And then I'm going to start by creating a new calendar called Release Calendar. I'm going to start by using the CalendarAuto function, and the main reason I'm using this function is because it's got an optional parameter which allows me to indicate what the final month of the financial year is. So let's say we want to create a calendar which starts the financial year in April. I can enter the number 3 as the end of the financial year, and if I close the round brackets and hit enter, the function will generate a continuous list of dates, starting from the earliest year found in the data model through to the last year found in the data model. So I've asked to end my financial year in month 3, so the first date is the 1st of April in the first year, and the last date will be the 31st of March in the final year. Just the same way as we had to create complete years for our standard basic calendars starting in January and ending in December, the same is true for financial years. Now you may have spotted a small problem with what the CalendarAuto function has done. I imported a range of films released between the years 2010 and the years 2016. So if I have a look at my film table, if I sort my release dates, the earliest release date is the 27th of January 2010, and the latest release date is the 21st of December 2016. But unfortunately, if I have a look back at my release calendar, the earliest year generated here is 1930. And the reason for that is that the CalendarAuto function looks at every column of dates in your entire data model. We have a separate table called Director, which also has a date field in it. So I've sorted the date of birth field here, so you can see the earliest date in there is 1930. Now I don't really care about including dates of my director's dates of births in my release calendar table. So the CalendarAuto function isn't really the best approach in this case. Let's replace it with a different function. If we want more control over the dates included in our calendar table, rather than using CalendarAuto, we can use the calendar function instead. Now the calendar function requires the start date and the end date for the range of dates that it's going to generate. just to make my life a little easier when we want to modify our calendar a little later on, I'm going to declare variables to hold the start date and the end date. So I'm going to modify my expression by adding a couple of blank lines using Shift and Enter. I'm going to create a variable called CalStart, and I'm going to make this one equal to the result of the date function to construct a date out of a year, month and day number. So remember, we got to start our calendar on the first day of the financial year for the first date in the model. So that was in January 2010. So the first day of the financial year of that date would be 2009, 4, 1. So the 1st of April 2009. Similarly, we need to create a calendar end variable. So let's say var cal end, and we'll make this one equal to date 2017, 3, 31. So the final film's release date was in December 2016, so the end of that financial year would be 31st of March 2017. Having done that, we can return the result of the calendar function using the return keyword. So let's say return calendar, and then we can pass into the calendar function our two variables. So we can say calStart, calEnd. Having closed the round brackets, and then we can hit enter, and we'll see that the range of dates now adjusts so that we only include dates from the 1st of April 2009 all the way through to the 31st of March 2017. Next, I'd like to make this calendar a little more flexible with regards to the start month of the financial year. This is a value we'll need to reference multiple times in expressions later on, and if I decide to update that value, I want a convenient place for me to change it. So I'm going to declare another variable that will hold the start month of the financial year. I'll call this one FY start month, and make it equal to the number 4. Now, Microsoft's recommendation, if you're intending to use some of the time intelligence functions later, particularly those involving the quarters, is that you make your financial start month equal to either April or July or October, so 4, 7 or 10. So I'm just going to add myself a quick little comment here to say use 4, 7 or 10, just to remind myself of that. You can use other numbers, but you may find that some of the time intelligence functions, like quarter to date, etc., don't quite work as intended. So, having done that, I now need to adjust my CalStart and CalEnd calculations. So rather than referring to the number 4 here in this date function, I can replace that with a reference to my FY start month variable. I'm going to do something similar for the CalEnd. I'm going to say FY start month, and then I'm going to try to calculate basically the same date in the final year, 2017, so 1st of April 2017. To get the end date of the year then, I can simply subtract 1 from that. Then I don't have to worry about whether the last month of the financial year has 31 days in the case of March, or 30 days in the case of June, etc. So simply subtract 1 to get the last date of the previous month. So having done all that, I can update the formula, and we'll see we get, once again, the 1st of April 2009 through to the 31st of March 2017. But if I decide to make July the first month of my financial year, we'll see that the dates start in July and end in June. So, nice, convenient, easy way to update my financial year start month. Next, I'd like to calculate the start year and the end year based on the dates held in the release date field of the film table. This is a little more complicated, but let's give it a try. Let's have a new variable, which I'm going to use to hold the start year. So I'll say var start year, and I'm going to make this one equal to, first of all, the year of the minimum release date in the film release date field. So I can refer to the year function first, and then inside that I can refer to the min function to give me the smallest value, and then from the film release date field I want to extract that minimum release date. So year min film release date, close a couple of sets of round brackets, and then let's update our CalStart variable so that it refers to our start year variable. So having done that, I can update my expression, but you'll see a small problem at this point. The earliest date we've now got in our date field is 2010, not 2009. So the issue here is that the first release date is in January of the year 2010. January is before the financial year start month, so we need to subtract 1 from the minimum year in that case. Now we could control all this using an if function, but that's a little long-winded and unnecessary. What we can do instead is subtract from the year the result of a Boolean expression. So imagine we were going to write an if function and we were going to check if the month of the minimum film release date was before the financial year start month. So I'm going to subtract in some round brackets the month of the min film release date, and it might just be easier to copy and paste this part of our expression first of all, and then replace the year function with the month function, and then check if the result of that is less than our financial year start month variable, so FY start month. I can then close that set of round brackets, and I might just tidy this up a little bit by taking that down to the next line and indenting it 1 space. So this is very similar to the logical test that you would write in an if function. When you write a straight logical test in a DAX expression like this, it returns either true or false, which is translated into a 1 or a 0. So if the result of this expression is true, we subtract 1 from the start year. Just to update the function at this point, if we check that the year 2010 changes to the year 2009, that's all working well. So then we can do a similar thing for the end year. Let's create a new variable called end year and make this one equal to the year of the max of the release date field from the film table. Okay, so again, we have a similar problem then at this point. If the year or the year of the last release date is greater than or equal to the financial year start month, then the end year is actually 1 year later. So taking a similar approach, I would like to add to the end of this the result of a Boolean expression. So again, I'm just going to quickly cheat, copy and paste part of this year max film release date, and then replace the year function with the month function. And then I'm simply going to check if that is greater than or equal to my financial year start month. So I can then replace the year 2017 in there with a reference to my end year variable. And if I now update the expression, we'll get a range of dates going from the 1st of April 2009 through to the 31st of March 2017. So we've got the full financial years encompassed, but everything is now quite dynamic and flexible. We can update the financial year start month, and the start year and end year will be based on whatever values we've imported into our data model. So we've successfully calculated our range of dates for our financial year calendar. Now let's start adding in the various other descriptors for those dates. I think there's still value in including some calendar values, so the calendar year, calendar month, calendar quarter, etc. So let's modify our return statement to use the AddColumns function. And the table that we're going to add columns to is the table that's been returned by our calendar function. Then after that, we can simply start listing out column names and then the expressions which generate the values for those columns. So let's go with a nice basic one. We'll go with a calendar year, which I'm just going to call year. And that's going to use the year function to calculate the year of the date field generated by the calendar function. So year and then this date reference. Then below that, we can reference the quarter. So I'm going to create a column called quarter. And again, there's a function for generating that nicely and quickly. So we'll say quarter and then refer to the date field again. We'll go with the month, which will give us the number of the month. This will be the calendar month, where January is 1, etc. We'll work out the financial month shortly. So we're going to use the month function to do that. And we'll refer to the date field again. And then let's also have the day of the month. So I'll say day and then use the day function to generate that. Finally, I think it's worthwhile just having the name of the month as well. So let's have a month name column. And to generate this, we're going to use the format function. So you'll remember this, I think, from the previous video if you've watched that one. So we'll say format date, and then in some double quotes, we'll have 4 M's to calculate the full month name. So once I've done that, I can hit enter, and that will generate the 5 additional columns, giving us the various values we need. Next, I want to calculate a description for the financial year. So at the moment, I'm starting my financial year in April. So let's say for any dates that were between January to March in 2010, I want the financial year description to say FY 2009/2010. For anything from April onwards, I want the financial year to read, if it was in 2010, FY 2010/2011. So to do that, we're going to concatenate some bits of text with the value of the year function, and we're going to use, again, a similar approach here, using Boolean expressions to work out whether to subtract or to add a value to add just the year number. So let's start. If we head back down to the end of the AddColumns function, I'll add a new comma at the end, and we'll create a new column called Financial Year. And then we'll make the first part of the expression nice and simple. I'm just going to say FY as a piece of literal text, and then concatenate that with the year of the date field. So at that point, if I just enter that formula, and then I just quickly sort the date column so we can see this in ascending order to make it a little easier to see what's going on. And then if I just zoom out to make it even easier to see what's going on, anything in the calendar year of 2009 will currently say FY 2009. As I get through to the end of that year, as soon as I get into January of the following year, that will automatically update to say the following calendar year. But I want to make sure that in January, February and March, that these still say FY 2009. So to make that work, I want to subtract 1 from the result of what I've done here from the year function. I want to subtract 1 if the month of that date is before the financial year start month. So I'm going to subtract from that, in some round brackets, the result of the month function. So I'm going to say month date. And then I'm going to check if that is less than the FY start month variable. Let's update the formula at that point. And again, if I just zoom out so we can hopefully see clearly what's going on. So from April onwards, we're still in financial year 2009. But as we get through to the end of the year, when we switch into 2010 in January, that's still 2009, as is February and March. So that part's working quite nicely. Let's zoom back in, and then we can add on the next part. So I'm just going to concatenate another string literal here in some double quotes, a / character, and then I can concatenate again on the next line the year of the date. But then I want to subtract 1 from the year. I beg your pardon, I want to add 1 to the year if the month of that date is greater than or equal to the financial year start month. So let's just quickly copy and paste that basic expression there. And then change the less than symbol to a greater than or equals to. And then we can update the formula. Zoom back out again, and we'll hopefully see some sensible results. So from April onwards in the year 2009, the financial year is 2009 to 2010, and that should continue through January, February and March of 2010. When we hit April 2010, the financial year is 2010 to 2011. So there we go, all that's working quite nicely. Next, I'd like to calculate the number of the financial month. So starting my financial year in April should mean that April becomes number 1 and then March becomes number 12. We could once again use an if function to do that, but I'd like to use a slightly different approach. And just to demonstrate how the approach is going to work, I want to break it down first of all in Excel. So I've quickly created a basic workbook here with the financial year start month in cell A2. I'd like to generate a sequence of numbers representing the numbers of the months from 1 to 12, so I can enter that into a cell here. And then from the month number, I'd like to subtract the financial year start month. So I'm simply going to reference that cell and then subtract from that the value of my financial year start. What I'd then like to do is divide that number by the number of months in the year and take the remainder of that division. And the function which does that in Excel and also in Power BI in DAX is called mod, short for modulo or modulus. So I'm going to take the number of the month minus the financial year start month and divide that by the number 12 and get the remainder. So having done that, when I then simply add 1 to the result, I'll get the adjusted month number. So if I have my financial year starting in April, then April becomes number 1, March becomes number 12. If I decide to start my financial year in July, then July becomes number 1, and so on and so on. So that's the basic approach, that's the step-by-step approach to put this into practice in our calendar. In Power BI, let's head back to the expression we're using to build our calendar table. And then right at the end of the existing column, let's add another comma, and then we can call this one financial month. So the calculation is going to use the mod function, as we've just seen. And I want to calculate the month of the date field, and then subtract from that the FY start month variable, divide the result by 12 and get the remainder of that division, and then finally add 1 to the result to get my adjusted financial month number. For the final column of this table, I want to calculate the financial quarter. And the expression for doing that is a little simpler. I simply want to take the value of the financial month, divide it by 3, and then round up the result. So let's add a new column to our list. I'm going to call this one financial quarter. And then I'm going to copy and paste a lot of the code from the previous line. So let's start by copying the mod function and everything to the end there with the +1. Now I want to wrap this up in a round up function. So I'm going to say round up first. And then I'm going to use the divide function to perform a safe divide of the value I've just calculated by 3. And then I want to round up to a number of digits that's equal to 0, so 0 decimal places. And then if I simply enter that, I'll get the financial quarter number, where April is the start of quarter number 1 and March is the end of quarter number 4. It may be nice to add in a quick little bit of text to the beginning of that. It's a bit more descriptive than the month number. So let's add on something like FQ and then concatenate that to the result. So it looks a little more readable when we drop that into any visuals in the report. So there we go. There's all the columns of our table calculated. Now there are a few more things we'll need to do before we can use this calendar table to create meaningful measures. To start with, we'll need to mark this calendar table as a date table. So from the Table Tools tab in the ribbon, we can choose Mark as Date Table, Mark as Date Table, and then select the only valid column that represents a date key in this table. So the only column which contains a continuous range of dates from the start to the end is the date column. That's been successfully validated, so then we can click OK. While I'm here, I'd also like to make sure that my month names are sorted in ascending order of financial month. So I'm going to select the month name column and then choose sort by column and choose financial month. So that will mean April will appear first in the sort order and March will appear last. Then we can head back to the model view of our data model and then head to the release calendar table, and I want to create a relationship between the date field in the release calendar and the release date field in the film table. I can do that nicely and easily just by clicking and dragging the date field and drop it directly on top of the release date field. So there's my new relationship. I can just hover the mouse over the relationship line to make sure I've connected the correct 2 columns. And we've got this nice one-to-many relationship indicator there as well. So each date appears once and once only in the release calendar date column. It's unique in that column, but the same date could appear multiple times in the release date field. So having done that, I'd also like to create a hierarchy that groups together the financial year, the financial quarter, and the name of the month. So in the release calendar in the model view, I'm going to start by right-clicking on the financial year field. I'm going to choose to create a hierarchy. And then once that hierarchy exists, I'm going to right click on the financial quarter and choose to add that to my financial year hierarchy. And then finally, I'm going to find my month name field, right click on that and add that to the same financial year hierarchy. So that just makes it a little easier later on to add that set of fields together as a group into visuals in the report. So on that note, let's head over to the report view, and I'm going to drop a matrix onto the page. And then into the matrix, I am going to insert my date hierarchy that I've just created, or the financial year hierarchy. I can check the box next to that. Let's also add in a basic field from the film table to create some aggregates. I'll go to the film table and choose maybe the runtime minutes field to get a sum of runtime minutes. Then if I just quickly bump up the font size using the global font property of that matrix, so we can see things a little more clearly, I hope. We should now find that if we drill down into the various levels of the matrix there, we can see financial quarters. So I've got my final quarter of the financial year 2009-2010, which incorporates January, February and March. So quarter 4 contains the first 3 months of the year. If I drill down even further, I can see that the months are included in the correct quarters in the correct financial years. So now that the calendar table is in place, it's nice and easy to create measures which work with the financial years we've set up. Let's add a new measure to the All Measures table. I'm going to right click and choose New Measure. And I want to calculate a running total year to date for the runtime minutes. So let's call this one something like total runtime YTD. And to do that, we can use the total YTD function. The expression is going to be the sum of runtime minutes. And then we're going to reference the date field of our release calendar table. So I'm going to say release calendar date. And then we simply want to set the year end date. So watch out for these year end date parameters you'll find in lots of DAX functions, which allow you to specify, well, literally that, the date on which your financial year ends. So we can do this for our calendar by saying 03/31 as a string in that parameter of that function. So entering that measure, I can then get rid of the delete me measure there as well. Let's delete that from the model just to convert this into a proper measures table. And then I can drop this new total runtime YTD measure into my matrix. So we should see that when we hit the end of financial year 2010, we've accumulated the total runtime up to that point, but then it resets in the first month of the following financial year. And then subsequently every April, the total will be reset. Of course, there are plenty of other time intelligence functions in DAX that will play nicely with your financial year calendar. You'll remember some of these functions we covered in section 6 of this playlist. Just to maybe give you a quick reminder of some of the more common ones, let's add a couple of other measures. I want to calculate the total runtime for the entire previous year for any individual date or any individual division in this matrix. So let's add a new measure to the All Measures table. I'm going to call this one total runtime previous year. And then we're going to make this one equal to the result of the calculate function. So we're going to use calculate to apply a filter to the date range used. So the expression is going to be the sum of the runtime minutes. And then the filter we're going to use will employ the previous year function. Just like with the total YTD function, there's a year end date parameter here. So the first thing I need to specify is my release calendar date field. That contains my continuous range of dates. And then the year end date, once again, 03/31 as a string. So having done that, I can create that measure. And if I just temporarily drop this one into the matrix, I'll get rid of it shortly. For any individual row in the matrix now, we're showing the grand total runtime for the previous year. But the previous year now defined from the 1st of April to the 31st of March. In a similar way, we could calculate the grand total of the current year's runtime so that we could see, for example, how much each month contributes to the total for that year. So to do that, we can add a new measure to the All Measures table. I'm going to call this one total runtime current year. And we'll do this in, well, there are several ways we could do this. I'm going to use calculate sum runtime. And then for the filters, I'm going to use the DatesBetween function. Now I need to reference my release calendar date field, the one that contains the continuous range of dates from start to finish. And then for the start date, I want to use the StartOfYear function. So to make this work, once again, I've got to reference my release calendar date field. And then I've got to say my year end date, which once again is going to be 03/31. This is perhaps a slightly more convoluted way to do this than it could be. I'm going to use the EndOfYear function then to set the end date. And again, I need to refer to my release calendar date. And then again, the year end date is 03/31. Okay, so having done that, I can enter that formula and then add that new measure to my table so that we can see that next to every row of the matrix, we're seeing a value that constitutes the grand total runtime for that year. Finally then, just to show something a little more meaningful, let's calculate the contribution of each month and quarter to the grand total for the current year. So I'm going to add one more measure, and I'm going to call this one, what should we call this one? Runtime percentage of year total, something like that. And we can make that one equal to the result of the divide function. And we're going to refer to the total runtime, or in fact, beg your pardon, the sum of runtime, first of all. And then we'll divide that by the total runtime for the current year, so that existing measure. And there's the final expression there. Once I've entered that, I'm just going to format that as a percentage to make it look a little more readable when we add it into the matrix. And then we can remove most of these other measures and then add in our brand new one so that we can see the contribution of each month and quarter to the yearly totals. So there we go. There's some information about how you work with financial year calendars in DAX. Hope you found some of that useful. Thanks very much for watching as always, and we'll see you next time.